name is Chris Kelly, founder and president of Asset HR out of Apple Valley, Minnesota. And I'm really excited to introduce you to Rocky LaGrone from Sales Development Expert. A quick background on myself and Rocky's relationship. About 15 years ago, I was going through the process of trying to unsuccessfully hire salespeople, getting very frustrated multiple times on hiring. I hired on a book of business. I hired on supposed expertise. I hired on the ability to, they wanted to make a lot of money. I hired on, I love cold calling. And I just got exasperated. I found out that there's really a science behind hiring quality salespeople. There's really a way to find out if you were about to hire a quality salesperson. And that's where Rocky came in. He's got a great concept. I don't want to steal his thunder. So without further ado, Rocky, take it over.
Chris, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. I want to make this more of a conversation. So if you guys have questions, if you've got thoughts, if you want to challenge something that we share, I'm happy to work on your agenda as opposed to ours. You can see our agenda on the right there. We're going to talk a little bit about the traditional hiring method and why that doesn't work in sales, how to identify that ideal salesperson, obviously attract them, screen, interview, offer, hire, onboard stronger salespeople. So if you would just take a minute and type in the chat, what is of most interest for you today out of that 9 categories on the right there? Just take a moment and do that. And while you're doing that, I want to let you know we also have a complimentary offer. If you guys have a candidate that's late stage or mid stage in your sales hiring process, we would like to offer you a free complimentary candidate assessment tool. We'll talk a little bit about that tool when we get to the screening part of this agenda. But if you have a couple of candidates, we can do 2. And that may give you an opportunity to kind of stack rank your candidates and see what they look like from a skill set, if they actually fit your profile. And it's a good way to kind of get a third party perspective and view. So if you'd like that, while you're typing in what you want me to focus on for you, we're going to ask Courtney to kind of give us some feedback along the way. If you have, again, questions, just put them in that chat, raise your hand, or let us know you want to talk. So just a little bit about me. I kind of fell into sales by accident like everybody else. We've been doing this for a very long time. Obviously, lots of podcasts, lots of magazine articles, lots of all kinds of blogs and stuff like that. But literally, we have helped companies hire about 10,000 salespeople. Last year, 500 plus hires in 2023. So I think the 200 different industries gives us a little different perspective. You know, if we think about sales managers, sales leaders, business owners, presidents, CEOs, and all of the salespeople that you have worked with, when you compare that to the experience that we have, we failed at a lot more than you have. So we know more about what not to do. I think that's the definition of success. And so we're going to do our best to share those best practices and secrets with you today. So again, a little bit different offer. If you would like, just let us know. We have a white paper on sales hiring trends for 2024, and then a case study for sales hiring of a recent client as recent as of January. So that may give you a little bit more information as well. So enough about me. Let's talk about sales hiring and that fun thing that everybody hates. You know, what we know is that traditional interviewing is really only 14% accurate in sales. And why is that? Well, I think it's because salespeople are pretty good at, you know, first impressions. They're pretty good at telling you what they think you want to hear. And oftentimes the candidate in sales management, sales leadership is better at interviewing than the person that's interviewing them because, I mean, think about it. That's what they do all day long. You know, so that's one fact to consider. We know that resumes today are certainly mostly written by GTP or some type of AI or some kind of resume program, and they're all, you know, expansive and exaggerated to some degree. What we want to help you with today is being able to identify the difference between can sell and will sell. And what we know from our research and data is there's about 75% of salespeople in sales today that shouldn't even be in sales. So there's a big difference in outcomes when you're able to identify early in your sales hiring process the difference between can, sell, and will. And we're going to give you a lot of that information. The challenge and what we find that companies really want to know is what's going to happen 90 days, 120 days, 12 months out. I want to be able to predict the future, and we can certainly help you do that. A lot of times we hear from clients and prospects and people we work with is, well, there's just not a good candidate pool out there. Well, I would tend to disagree. There's 18 million salespeople in the USA today, and the average tenure is 18 months. So there is a constant moving market within the sales community, and it's really about getting in front of the right person and attracting that person. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move along today. When we think about the risk of failure and the frustrations, as Chris mentioned, we got together 15 years ago, and this is a very common finding that, we hire on the book of business, we hire on the relationships they have, we hire on experience, we hire on, the ability to cold call and whatever it might be. And today we know that the risk is about 75% failure when companies hire salespeople, especially when you've got open territories, positions, you really need a salesperson. We have a tendency to wear those rose-colored glasses, and we're almost like salespeople listening to prospects when we're wearing happy ears, and we see the positives, but we're not skeptical enough, and we don't really, pay close attention to what's between the lines. So again, we'll help you with that today. Navigating the job boards, man, we can waste a lot of money on job boards, and I'm not so sure that job boards are always the best way to go. And so we'll talk about that when we look at sourcing for candidates. And then people tend to, based on their ads and how they're advertising, they're attracting a weaker candidate pool today. So obviously, great salespeople don't get fired. Great salespeople may be in transition at some point or the other, but they're not the guy that, is constantly looking for a job. And so when you're placing those ads, oftentimes we're attracting the wrong people. So we're going to help you with that. We'll look at this cost of a bad hire in detail. And I don't want to make you sick or give you a stomach ache today, but there are some things that companies just don't always think about that I want you to really be aware of when you look at hiring salespeople in the future. And then, of course, the disruption, that creates tons of frustration. You get a new salesperson, you give them all the resources they need. Now they're competing with the other salespeople. They're competing for sales managers' time. They're competing for resources and, payroll and commissions. And it's just a disruption. And that's what often prevents companies from saying, okay, it's time to hire a salesperson, because they've been burned so many times and they got so much. And oftentimes the devil is better than the devil that you don't know. And then, of course, that lost opportunity, whether it's a vacancy or whether you've hired someone and they just didn't work out. That's just so frustrating for organizations. And so we want to help with that. We think we can give you all the tools that you need to be able to fix these sales hiring issues. And then one last thing you see on the screen there is sales managers. A players won't work for B managers. And so oftentimes when we help define that ideal salesperson and we go through the sales specific hiring process, it's really part of that is looking at the sales manager's skills, whoever that salesperson is going to report to, whether it's a principal led company that the owner is the sales manager, or maybe you've got a operations organization and you're looking for your first salesperson, or maybe this is your 10th or 50th salesperson. It's that manager is really responsible today to help them be successful. So we've got to take a look at all of the pieces of the puzzle, not just, is it the right candidate? Did we write the right ad? Are we using the right assessment tool? What's our process? So everything that we're going to talk about today is the comprehensive approach. We are not recruiters, but we've certainly done recruiting. I had a recruiting business for 7 years called Sales Kingdom. We nationalized it, we franchised it, we sold it, and then I took all of the systems and processes. And in those 7 years, we had to replace one person. And so we took all of the successful steps and processes and tools that we were using, and we put it in this nice, neat package. And this is what we're talking about today, because we believe it's better to teach you guys how to do it than it is to do it for you. And about 70% of this sales hiring process can be transferred into other positions of the organization. So when we think about sales hiring options, obviously you can do it yourself. I would tell you that's about 75% failure rate, if not more. We can use recruiters, and don't get me wrong, there are a lot of good recruiters out there that don't follow this, but typically when you think about recruiters for a average sales position, you're going to pay about 20 grand. They're going to ask for your job description. They're going to review that. And honestly, I've never seen a job description that was right. And sometimes they just have to kind of dust it off and hand that off. And then the recruiter goes to their database. They're looking for industry experience. They're looking for years of experience. Again, many of the wrong criteria that they look for. They find a candidate, they call the candidate, they sell the candidate on your company, your opportunity, and then they call you and say, hey, we got a great candidate for you. We've interviewed them, but they really didn't interview them like we're going to teach you how to interview today. They sell you on the candidate, they send them over, they hope you hire them, and they pray that you keep them for 90 days so they get the balance of their fee. And so that's a very challenging way to go about hiring salespeople as well. And if you look at, the higher level the salesperson, the higher the fee. If you're looking at sales managers, you might be looking at 25 to 30 grand. Sales leaders, you could be looking at 40. So there is a better way. We call this SHARC, Sales Hiring and Recruiting Companion. So let's look at this traditional model. When you think about how companies go about hiring someone, let's just say that you're looking for a office manager, and take out the job description, place the ad, you start getting resumes, you look at those resumes, you bring people in for an interview, maybe you bring them back for a couple of interviews, you may have some assessment that they're using for, personality or style or behaviors, and then you hire that person, and within a couple of weeks, they've learned your internal systems, the people they work with, what their role is, and where they fit into the organization. And they kind of do pretty good, and they just start melding into the organization. Sales is very different, right? In sales, we place the ads, we collect the resumes. We'll talk about resumes, but there's always missing information, and that's what's more important. Again, the interviews, the salespeople are better at it. And so it's challenging for the interviewer to really smoke out what are the skills, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses. And then we'll talk about assessments, but all these assessments out there are not sales based. There's something else. And so that gives you information, but it's not the right information to determine if they can sell or will sell. All of the other assessments tell you if they can sell. And that's good to know, but what we want to know in the leadership is, will they sell? Will they sell in your market against your competitors at your price points with your competition and your differentiating value? And will they be better than people that are already on your team? And so when you think about this traditional model, it just doesn't work in sales. So before we get into some of the other stuff, Gwen, Courtney, has anybody typed anything in the chat on what areas they would like to really take a deeper dive on?
No, we haven't seen any questions come through in the chat.
Okay.
Feel free
All right.
questions to add them. Gwen and I are sitting here in the background waiting.
Okay. Feel free to type something in or let us know, and we'll take a deeper dive. When you think about, obviously that hope and pray is not a strategy, right? That's not a good business strategy. So what do? We got to change the way we identify, attract, screen, interview, hire, and onboard sales champions. One of the things that tends to be missing, I'm not going to spend a ton of time here because I don't want to make you really sick, but let's think about what are the steps to go about hiring salespeople. Well, you place the ads. You're probably going to be spending $2,000 to $3,000 on ads. When you take the time and effort that you go through for interviewing, your phone screens, your first interviews, your second interviews, you get other people involved. We've got, a pretty strong hourly rate. Multiply that in whatever resources you give people for onboarding, whether it's new computers, lists, territories, workspace, mileage, all of that. Of course, the compensation for the number of months that they were employed. I mean, unless you're one of the very few who have figured out how to get people to come on board at straight commission. Even straight commission has some cost to it. But, from a salary standpoint, what are you paying them? What kind of commissions do they make? Multiply that times the number of months. And then one of the biggest costs that companies don't look at is the cost of a lost opportunity. And so to calculate that, you just think about, what is my top performer and what did they produce in the same time frame that salesperson that didn't produce, that you fired, or they quit due to lack of productivity? What's the comparison there? And that's usually the biggest. But one of the real biggest is the reputation, and that's really priceless. So when you add all of this up, we typically find that it's 3 times the annual pay, or at least on even a beginning level sales job, it's about 100 grand. So we can help you save all that money, and we want to help you, again, put in a sales specific hiring process. So let's talk about identify, track, qualify, interview, offer, onboard, and retain sales stars. First thing, and you can take some time to think about this, but we call it base. What is the behaviors, attitudes, the skills, and the environment? And so what is that DNA of that ideal salesperson? Obviously, selling pay-per-click advertising is a lot different than selling $250,000 enterprise software. We had a client a couple of weeks ago that was looking for, and they were in the home inspection business, and first salesperson, and he wanted to pay them about $30,000 a year. And it was kind of part-time, which was really lower than it should be, but he had no idea about where to go with this. What were the behaviors that he should be expecting and defining when you think about the goals, their goals? What kind of paperwork, what kind of work ethic is necessary? Do they have any kind of time and workspace management behaviors that are required to be successful? What is their prospecting discipline? What's the focus that they have to have? When we think about those attitudes, these are all kind of things that go on between our ears. We'll talk a little bit more about this when we get to the assessment, but we really need to take some time just to identify that ideal salesperson. Can they make decisions? Do they make decisions? Do they have experience selling to the types of people that you're going to ask them to be selling to? Do they have experience with that sales cycle? What kind of skills do they need? Do they need to be able to perform in a boardroom and on a factory floor? Or do they need to be able to do, social media and these types of meetings with platforms like what we're using today? Do they need to have the technical experience? So most companies, while they look at their job description, those job descriptions talk about tasks. They talk about, the opportunity. They talk about who you're going to be calling on, but they don't really take the time to identify what is that good fit? What's the environment? All of this base information here. And so we want to help you make sure that you identify your ideal salesperson. So once we do that, we can wrap some psychodynamics around that and really identify the ideal salesperson and where they're at. Where do they go? What do they do? Where do they spend their time? Is it a very senior position? Is it a very early entry position, or is it somewhere mid-level? Is it outside? Is it inside? Is it very specific to inside? Are they reactive or are they outbound? Is it BDRs? Who are they calling on? What are the positions in the organizations they're calling on? How much resistance do they face when they pick up the phone to call someone? Is there leads that are going to be given to them, or are they mostly going to go out and get their own? Is this an account management role? Is this a sales true creative role where they got to create the opportunity? Or is it some type of hybrid where they're going to be required to hunt some, but also manage and maintain accounts? And then what size are those accounts? What price points are we asking? So there's a whole lot of things that people just don't think about when you identify your ideal salesperson. Once we have that, we can write the ads. And so the ads are very different that we want to write. Most ads, as you can see on the screen, they're boring. It's like they all look the same. Just if you haven't done this before, go to any job board and just type in sales and look at the job descriptions. Look at the ads. They're horrible. Nobody wants to apply to those kinds of jobs. It's kind of ridiculous. It's like they're writing ads the way they did back in the 60s and 70s, and it hasn't changed. And there needs to be a change. Obviously, there's different generations. There's different motivations for those generations. There's different language we want to use. There's different ways to describe. So we want to write the ad so that when the ideal candidate looks at that ad, they go, oh my gosh, that is me. I have to apply there. That is me to the T. So in short, we're going to describe that perfect salesperson. It's really easy from our perspective because we've been doing it for so long, but it's difficult for some people to kind of make that jump. And especially when you're not used to hiring salespeople, we tend to think that maybe this language is too powerful. Maybe it's too offbeat. Maybe it's too creative. Maybe it's kind of different. But you know what? If we're looking for a different type of salesperson, we got to change the way we go about attracting them. And this is the way that we do that. So there's often creative ways to go out once you have the ad and place those ads that don't cost all that money that you spend on job boards. Case in point, we worked with a coffee company. They didn't make the coffee, they made the espresso machines. So they were manufacturing the espresso machines and they were selling them to places like, Starbucks, your local coffee shop, restaurants, places like that. And I mean, these machines weren't cheap. They're 30 to 50 grand, depending on how many bells and whistles you wanted. And so instead of going to the typical job boards and looking for people who sold manufacturing products or sold to restaurants or hotels or whatever, we took the ad, we put it in the coffee shop. I mean, where do salespeople go, right? When they're in between meetings, they're out running around, they stop at the coffee shop. Where do salespeople have a lot of morning meetings? At the coffee shop. We put it on the billboard, on the bulletin board. We also, most cities have this little, in those coffee shops, they have an entertainment magazine or a newspaper. And that tells you where the bands are playing, where the best restaurants are, the reviews, and it's kind of like an entertainment magazine. And we put ads in there. And man, it wasn't 2 weeks, and we had a host of great candidates. So when we think about writing the ad and then where do you place the ad, we got to get really creative there. And we've got tons of experience helping you with that. If they're, a technology salesperson, that's different than a manufacturing rep. That's different than a media, newspaper, radio, TV, maybe billboards, landscaping. Everything is different and has its own thing. But what we know is once we identify the ideal salesperson, there are a lot of parallel industries and marketplaces with salespeople who are doing the exact same thing. So case in point, if you think about a salesperson that sells uniforms, they sell to car dealerships, manufacturing plants, they sell to service organizations where, they've got the weekly uniform and they're selling the mats and the rugs and all of that. And so it's a service, right? And think of Aramark or somebody like that. And then think about a copier company. Well, today I think they call them business machines, right? Used to be copiers. Well, about 15 years ago, we were working with both of those types of companies. And what hit me that week was, okay, here's an Aramark type company. Here's a Canon copier kind of company. And man, I looked at the job profiles and they're exactly the same. Both of those organizations and those industries spent a ton of effort in the late 90s for CRMs, for accountability. So both of those organizations have great accountability. They've got great internal systems and processes. They're closely managed. They're coached. They're held accountable. They have a sales cycle of about 3 to 5 months because their contracts are typically 3 to 5 years. And so when those contracts come up for renewal, you get about 3 months before that decision has to be made. They're also selling to the admin, typically office manager, maybe comptroller, but it's not the owner. It's somebody within the office management systems and processes role, right? And so they're not selling to the decision maker, they're selling to the liaison, whoever that might be. Call them a white knight, a champion, whatever. And they have very similar price points. And so when you take someone from that Aramark world, you can drop them in this business machines world and it'll automatically just be a great fit. Not because they have experience selling office products, but because they have the same experience with the same sales types and processes and day-to-day activities, same management, same price point. So one of the big mistakes companies make is they say, oh, well, we need to hire this person because they got a great Rolodex, they got great experience, we want to get into those industries, we want to get into those companies. And what they're really doing is they're buying a Rolodex, they're buying a list of companies, and they're hoping that this salesperson has the ability to bring them over. But if this candidate has been working with a large organization and they really hadn't had to work that hard because they're living on their name, and now they're going to work with an underdog who doesn't have all those resources, doesn't have those names, it's really challenging. And they're paying a lot more money for that. So I'm okay with a company doing that if you realize you're just buying the Rolodex, you're buying the list, and you're hoping people, insurance companies do that all the time, right? So we understand that once we identify the ideal person, then we can write the ad that describes that ideal person. And then we place that ad in places where that ideal person is going to be, and we put that in front of them. And that's when they begin the next step, which is to complete an assessment. And so I'm sure from the HR world, and Chris knows this as well as anybody, there are tons of different types of assessments out there. And so just want to take a minute and kind of differentiate some of those assessments and what they measure. So if you think about a personality assessment, maybe DISC, Myers-Briggs, something like that, it's great information. It tells us what their tendencies are, what their styles are, how they communicate, and it's good stuff. But what they're saying about sales is that if someone has the ability to make friends, then they have the ability to make sales. And that's just not true. Otherwise, all of our friends will be clients. And so personality assessments are not really, whoops, I'm getting ahead of myself there. I don't know what happened. The personality assessments are not really predictive of sales success. They're predictive of building relationships. And there's a lot more to sales than just relationships. And then we have behavior assessments. Behavioral assessments say, here's the top behaviors of the top performers in this group. Maybe it's 600 people from an organization or an industry, or 300 people or 3,000 people. But very few of them go more than 5,000 people. And so I can't disagree with those behaviors that they list of successful people, but what they don't do is they don't look at the bottom performers. And if they did, you would see that the bottom performers have many, if not all, of those same behaviors. And so just because someone has a set of behaviors does not mean they're going to be successful in sales. Sales is different, right? Sales is pressure. Sales is dysfunctional. And I can say that because I are one. That's the only industry that looks forward to getting up and going and getting no's all day. I mean, imagine your accounting department showing up at the end of the week and saying, hey, our payroll is about 70% done. We're going to send it anyway. Hey, taxes are due Monday. We're going to file an extension, but we're going to pay a little bit so we don't pay penalties and fines. But, it's about 30% done. We're just going to guess at the rest. Nobody would do that, right? So sales is very different, and we have to look at it through a different lens. So behavior assessments do not predict sales success. Aptitude, another great set of findings. It's good stuff. It tells us what somebody knows, right? Cognitive information. How do they think? How quickly can they solve problems? Can they, figure out spatial and numbers and, situational analysis, and how quick are they? What's their IQ? It's all good stuff, but it's not sales predictive. I mean, Chris, I think you play a little golf. Let's suppose that you and I played golf tomorrow with Schaefer, the #1 golfer in the world. And he told us how to drive the ball high or curl it or cut it or fade it or whatever they do. And then how to make the approach, how to get out of the sand, how to spin the ball, how to putt 40 yards over a double undulating putt. We would have the aptitude to play in the PGA the next day. But my guess is we wouldn't be able to actually do it. And so just because you know something doesn't mean you can do it at the right time, in the right situation, with the right mindset. And so these assessments are great for what they were designed for, but they were all built in a social setting. You can trace it all back to Carl Jung. You can trace his stuff back to Freud. You can trace Freud's stuff back to Plato and Socrates. And it's all built on the same foundation of PF16, personal factors 16. Good stuff to know about people for management, for leadership, for communication, for the right role, as long as it's not in sales. So we have an assessment we use, and this should be updated. We've evaluated 2.5 million salespeople. We have a third-party validation that says 92% of the people that are recommended by the assessment and hired are with the company a year later and exceeding expectations. 75% of those people that are not recommended don't make it past 6 months if they're hired anyway. And then, of course, there's a sliding scale of difficulty. So it's not just one dimensional, it's really customized to your company, to your role, to how you manage, to your marketplace, to all of those things that we identified earlier in the identification phase. And so some of these findings we call the 21 core competencies. And so if we think about the left column here, the will to sell, that's kind of, the grit. I mean, when you think about, does somebody have enough grit to get through the learning curve that they're going to have to go through in your organization? I mean, obviously they got to learn your products, your services, who your markets are, your sales pitch, your process, your CRM, all the resources. There's a pretty big learning curve, right? And we know that people that don't have strong will to sell will not get through that learning curve. And so we call that grit. And so we're able to measure that and be able to put some limits and some factors on that based on the difficulty level of the sale, right? And so then when we think about, these tactical skills over here, these tactical skills will really give us those normal findings that you would expect a sales assessment to provide. And so you can read these. I'm not going to read them all and talk to you about every single one of these, but obviously, will they prospect? Not can they, but will they? Instead of asking somebody in the interview, well, this job's going to require cold calling. Well, how do you feel about that? Oh, I love cold calling. Come on, Christians, jump in. Here's the Lions. Let's go. But that's not always the best way to find that out, right? Are they calling on the right people? Are they calling at the top? Are they reaching those decision makers? Most salespeople do a pretty good job at building relationships, but they're only using 2 or 3 of the tactical skills. And so when you think about building relationships, what we're talking about is, can they build trust early? Can they be the trusted advisor in the first 10 minutes, right? That's what we want to know. Obviously, consultative selling has had a huge push, the last 20 years. And everybody says, oh, we went through consultative selling. But here's a way to test that. Write down the 3 hardest questions your salespeople have to ask on every sales call. Everybody in the company will ask a different question, and none of them will be that hard. So consultative selling is about listening, asking tough questions when it's time, confronting the prospect when they're making a bad choice, when they're not giving you good information. Are you following the questioning tracks that help the prospect discover their problems and take ownership of those problems? Obviously, value, qualifying. Are they sending out too many proposals? If you're not getting at least 50% or more of wins out of your proposals, you're wasting time and resources. And a lot of those things could be eliminated earlier in the sales process. Closing. probably the most overrated, because this is really a makeup of all the tactical skills that come before that. So not only do we measure these things about candidates, but we can certainly measure them about your current team and help you identify what you need to do to make sure you got the right people in the right roles, to make sure that you've got the right leadership in place that has the ability to coach and motivate and hold people accountable and grow the team. Do we have the right systems and processes in place? Do we have the right strategies in place? Is there alignment in that? So this is the tip of the iceberg of what we have the ability to measure, not only with candidates, but also with organizations that have teams that may be floundering or may be kind of stuck and they need to grow, and they don't have the resources to go buy a company and acquire someone to grow, right? So there's two ways to grow a company. You can go acquire business, or you can grow organically. And if you need to grow organically, all this information gives you the sales intelligence to be able to make the right decisions to grow faster. And so then we look at sales DNA. This is probably one of the biggest things that nobody measures out there. When you think about what's going on between the ears, what's 3, 4, 5 layers deep. And of course, I could spend hours on all of these 6 findings alone. But need for approval, when salespeople have need for approval from their prospects, then they don't ask the hard questions. They take stalls and put offs. They don't get decisions. They have bloated pipelines. And so we need to know that about candidates. It doesn't mean that we're going to throw them out automatically because of one finding. It just means that if everything else is pretty good and they got some weaknesses, then when we onboard them, we know what to help fix, because nobody's going to come on board perfectly, right? Stays in the moment. This is really the listening skills. Do they listen effectively to be able to know what questions to ask to get the prospect to continue to move along and get to a decision faster, right? Sales is about getting decisions, yeses and nos. And I just soon get an early no as I had to get an early or a late yes, because I'm not going to waste time and resources. That's the only thing salespeople have that they can't replace, is time. And that lost time means we're not getting to other people who need our help. Supportive beliefs. These are things that are 3, 4 layers deep that are driving their outcomes. The economy is tough. Our prices are expensive. Our competitors are cheaper. I have to send information first. I can't call on a CEO. There are 60 different non-supportive beliefs that we screen for that you don't even have to leave the office, and they'll tell you exactly what to do to help that salesperson and exactly what their outcome is going to be. Buy cycle. We know that the way people buy things personally is a mirror image of the way they expect people to buy from them. So if I have a long buy cycle, I'm going to expect long sales cycles. If I think it over, I'm okay with thinking overs. If I shop around, I'm okay if they shop around. And so this buy cycle will have tons of underlying impact on the salespeople. Now, most people never heard of that before, but it does have huge impact. And then the ability to discuss money. Obviously, in sales, we have to talk about money, but some of those non-supportive beliefs, right? We all grew up hearing, well, money's none of your business. Money doesn't grow on trees. Money is private. So there are a lot of these sales DNA factors, right? So we call these unconscious biases. And when we find these out, it will absolutely impact the outcome of their sales. And then the skills, of course, that's going to impact what kind of training and development they need in the skill set. And these are not just one-dimensional. These are 8 to 10 attributes that make these competencies up, and it's all customized based on your particular role. So let's talk about resumes, right? What we know is that I've never seen a bad one, right? They all look good. They all sound good. They're all superstars. They're superheroes, right? Everybody makes President's Club. But how do they make President's Club? How many calls did they have to make? How many sales did they have to make? What was the requirements to make President's Club? Were those accounts that they were given? Were those accounts that they grew? Were those accounts that they went out and found? Was that family or friends that gave them that business? Was it somebody from the past when they moved over and brought those accounts with them? How did they make that President's Club? What did they do? And so what's important on the resume is what's missing, not what's there. Let's talk about interviews. We want to teach you a very different phone screen. So now we've got a candidate, they send us a resume, they've taken the assessment, they passed the assessment. Now it's time to talk about a phone screen. And this is really just a 5-minute call to disqualify. It's really easy. We've got the scorecards, we give you the questions to ask, we give you the scripts, and it starts out something like this. And Chris, you don't have to answer. Hey, Chris, I had us down for a call today at 3. Is it still a good time for you? Okay. Well, Chris, I got a few questions for you. The ad said you needed to have A, B, C, D, and E. Tell me what qualifies you for that. I mean, it's pretty simple, but we're going to get into a little more questions, but it's not going to take that long. So you got to think about putting salespeople in the environment that they're going to be in when they're selling for your organization. So once they pass a phone screen, we want to do the first interview, whether that's through Zoom or some type of platform like this. I'm going to turn it into an audition. It's not going to take more than about 30 minutes to expose their strengths and expose their weaknesses. We got all the forms that you can stay in check, and we'll teach you what to ask on the resume and from the assessment itself, the scorecards. And then if we really want to take this candidate to the next level, then we're going to get them an assignment. And that assignment's going to be something simple that they can do that's going to take those 5 or 6 candidates that we bring back for the second interview and show who has more capabilities. What kind of effort did they put in their projects? What could I expect if this person is coming to work with us? And so by asking the right questions, by setting that first interview up very differently, I don't want to help them build rapport, right? Salespeople are strong at building rapport. So I'm going to not try to build rapport and see if they can build rapport with me. I'm going to ask pointed questions. I'm going to ask them to prove things to me. You know, if this job requires that they have great prospecting experience and they have to hunt, then they should have been hunting in the past. And if that's the case, I want to hear that call. Chris, it said on your resume that you were responsible for new business, and we're certainly looking for somebody that's got the ability to bring in new business. How many calls were you making a day on average? How many did you make on a week? How many contacts did you get out of those calls? What did that call sound like? Let's suppose I'm the person you're selling to from your old job. What did that call sound like? If they were actually doing it, they can rattle off that call just like this. Now, I'm not judging if it's right or wrong or good or bad or what I might want to coach them on, but I'm certainly looking at what do they actually have they been doing. So based on the job, based on the requirements, based on the criteria, we'll modify that questioning for the first for the first interview to be able to identify if they have the capabilities. Next, we'll look at compensation and documentation. Now, some companies are all set with that, and that's great, but we've written thousands of comp plans, and we just want to make sure that you're competing in the marketplace for the type of salesperson that you need. A lot of companies have a beer budget with a champagne taste, and you just cannot get to the right number, if you will, right? They got to be able to look at what's competitive in the marketplace. And the average salesperson in this country makes $86,000 a year. So how do we go about making sure that everybody understands what the real deal is and how that's going to work? The second interview is pretty easy. It's what most people want to do in the first interview, which is sell the opportunity and sell the company, right? Well, a lot of organizations have a really poor onboarding plan, you know, and I don't know, I'm exaggerating here, but it's like pin a $20 bill to their collar and wish them good luck. Well, that doesn't cut it, right? We know there's about 60 plus things that the company needs to share about their resources. There's another 60 plus things about sales. What is the process? What's the CRM? What is your differentiating value? Who's going to role play with them? Where are the weekly checkpoints? What kind of deadlines do we have in place? Who's going to be responsible for what? And so we will have a very specific 90-day onboarding plan, because if they're not going to do it in the first 90 days, they're not going to do it after. And so we want to set the bar really high and force this onboarding and this learning curve to really happen the way it's supposed to. So in 90 days, you got somebody that's producing, right? So I had a conversation the other day with a client. And they're like, well, when should I expect them to produce? It's like, well, it should take 30 days, no longer, for them to learn enough about your organization to have a intelligent conversation with a prospect. Doesn't mean they have everything, but they can have an intelligent conversation. And then you add your sales cycle, whatever it is, if it's 60 days, 90 days, 12 months, add your sales cycle to that 30 days, and that's when you should start seeing results. And if you're not seeing results by then, it's likely due to a poor selection, a poor onboarding plan, a poor sales manager, or something that we can't control. Like they win the lottery, they get hit by a truck, something crazy happens in life. And we know those things kind of happen. So the onboarding plan is really critical for future success. So what do we help you do? Well, obviously, we help you identify, attract, onboard, screen, interview, hire, keep, and we have a very vested interest in your organization. We come at this from a very different perspective. It's not a recruiter's perspective. It's not a testing perspective. It's the entire comprehensive package of sales hiring to keep you from making mistakes. And that's what we live for. So when we think about results, there's tons of success stories and tons of people, but we have 3 different programs that we help companies with. One, self-guided. If you are really good at this stuff already, you've got great systems, you've got great processes, you've got great experience, but sales is kind of the challenge, then maybe you can do it yourself. But we give you everything that we have. So everything's set up online. It's 10 modules. How do you go about identifying? Of course, we'll do an orientation. In our learning management system, we've got role plays and videos and how-to guides and everything that you need to be able to kind of do this by yourself if you're that kind of person. We find that most companies really need all of that plus some more guidance. And so we would like to, spend more time with you here. We want to look at your ads. We'll, review them. We'll make suggestions. Oftentimes we wind up rewriting the ad for people. We'll help you with non-traditional sourcing, things to think about that maybe you never have. We'll help you review some resumes, some assessments, give you some advice on the comp plan and the onboarding plan. We want to review that with you. And then, of course, for those who really feel like they need more help, we have our concierge program. It's really all the stuff in the self-guided, the guided, and the guided, plus 5 one-on-ones. And that's with your team, not just with one person. Anybody that touches that sales hiring process needs to be part of this. And then, of course, we'll provide on-demand coaching for you. So I hope this is really helpful for you. If you're in the market to hire salespeople, maybe you picked up 1 or 2 things. I know we're near the end of our time here. We want to save some time for questions and answers. But I also want to let you know, again, if you have a candidate in late stage, just put your name in the chat and we'll need your email and your company name, and we'll send you a link and you can have 2 candidates tested. We'll measure those 21 core competencies. We'll spend about an hour together reviewing that with you and helping you. We've also got the white paper on sales hiring trends, and then, of course, the case study on sales hiring. So with all of that being said, let me kind of turn it back onto the admin side of this and ask if you guys have any questions, if there was anything that showed up in the chat. Maybe somebody could share a lesson learned or something that you got out of the program that was helpful for you today.
We do have a question from Ricardo asking, I was wondering if you recommend working/hiring with salespeople outside of the US.
Oh, absolutely. We've worked a lot in Latin America, of course, Canada, kind of our northern sister. We have clients in Europe. Last year, we helped a company set up a call center in Pakistan. So absolutely, everything is not only just 200 different industries, but 154 countries we've worked in. So Ricardo, yes, we can help in Latin America.
If anyone else has questions or comments, we'll hang out here for a minute or 2 longer to see if they pop up in the chat. Otherwise, Ricardo said thank you. Otherwise, this will be sent out to everyone that registered as a replay, along with the handouts included in that email. We will also make it available on our YouTube channel. If you haven't checked that out recently, you should take a peek, because we have every training from the last few months available on that platform as well.
Awesome, Courtney. Thank you. And Chris, can't say thank you enough from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate you inviting me in to be your guest, and I hope at least something we said helped somebody today.
Thanks, Rocky. This was wonderful.
Have a nice day. Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day.